It did not detonate. It did not arrive with a scream. It began as a ghost, a string of numbers burning on a screen. 3:14 a.m., the hour of the wolf. The time he had seen my last plea, the one I had sent into the digital ether hours before, asking for the mercy of a conversation. He had let it sit there, a scar of blue light, a wound left open. And in that moment, my life inverted. His became the sun, and mine, the desolate planet caught in its orbit, studying its light for signs of life. My own thumb grew a second phantom nervous system, a feverish hummingbird with a singular, frantic purpose. Unlock, open, check, close. The app, the album, the screen going dark. Again. A ritual performed 60, 70, 100 times a day. We had built a digital reliquary, a collaborative album we'd foolishly christened The Archive. It was meant to be our story, frozen in light. Now it was my cathedral of pain. I would scroll through the captured moments, a liturgy of our dead love. Us, ghosts on a wind-battered beach, hair whipping across our faces. Us, pale figures dusted in flour, a failed attempt at pasta immortalized. Us, asleep on a train, heads leaned together, oblivious. Each image sent a current through me, the jolt of a phantom limb being twisted, a pain with no source and no relief. Then the archaeology began. I was no longer a mourner, but a detective, excavating the ruins for the precise moment of collapse. In this photo from July, are his eyes focused on something beyond the frame? Was that anniversary caption he wrote just a string of empty words, a pre-written template for affection? Then the new artifacts started appearing. A single sunlit pint of beer on a wooden table. No context, no people. Just a silent offering. Was he alone? Or had he performed a careful surgery, cropping a new life out of the frame? My heart would begin its frantic drumming against my ribs, a muffled alarm. A slick, cold sweat would bloom on my palms. I'd have to place the phone screen down, a gesture of surrender, and breathe. 1, 2, 3. You're insane, I'd tell the shaking ghost in the room. 30 seconds later, the phone would be back in my hand, my fingers pinching, zooming, searching for the reflection of a stranger in the curve of the glass. The ghost of a face that was not mine. Sleep became a country I was exiled from. Lying in the dark, the sheets were sandpaper against my skin, my mind a rogue projectionist playing films I hadn't commissioned. I built entire women for him out of dust and anxiety. A woman who smelled of old books and wore soft, worn sweaters. A woman with calloused hands from climbing rocks, whose laugh was effortless and bright. I directed their conversations in my head, the cadence of his voice as he recounted his day, the geography of her hand as it came to rest on his arm. The scenes were so saturated, so painfully real, I'd wake up hollowed out as if I had spent the night running from my own creations. The world of sustenance became alien. I would open the refrigerator and its cold light would spill onto the floor, illuminating objects that had lost their meaning. A carton of eggs. A jar of pickles. What were these for? I was a specter in my own apartment, drifting from room to room, fueled by the bitter dregs of coffee and a low, humming terror. I was convinced this exquisite madness was my secret. I was a functioning person, moving through the world. I was fine, until I saw what he had done. It wasn't an addition. It was a subtraction. A quiet, deliberate act of vandalism on our shared memory. He'd gone into the archive and deleted one photograph. Just one, the one I took of him last fall on the camping trip. He's looking into the fire, its light dancing in his pupils. A secret, private smile is on his face because in that moment, he doesn't know he is being seen, being loved. It was my favorite image, not because it was of us, but because it was of him through my eyes. And he had reached back through time with a digital scalpel and excised it. He had unseen himself. The world went silent. A thick, profound quiet, as if someone had packed my ears with snow. The air rushed out of my lungs, my chest collapsing inward like a dying star. That was it. The moment the girders buckled and the floor fell away. I drove home from work, the city lights smearing into watercolor streaks. I walked into my apartment and the silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was occupied. His absence was a physical presence, a dense, suffocating pressure that made the air thick and hard to breathe. I slid down the kitchen cabinets, my bones settling onto the cold linoleum, and I simply ceased. I sat there as the sun bled out of the sky, casting long skeletal shadows across the floor. In the corner of the room, I watched a spider patiently weaving a silver suture in the dark. I felt nothing. I was a void. I held my hand up in the gloom and it looked translucent, as if the tile pattern was visible right through my skin. This wasn't heartbreak. This was an erasure. I was being unwritten. This was the bottom. A silent, airless chasm where you are no longer a person, just a memory that has not yet had the grace to fade completely. Sometime in the dead of night, I crawled, an animal, to my laptop. The screen's glow was an aggressive, unwelcome light in my tomb. I opened a browser and my fingers typed a sentence that felt like the raising of a white flag. How to get a thought out of your head. I scrolled past the empty promises of blogs, the slick TED Talks, the endless churning river of hollow positivity. And then the cold, unfeeling wisdom of the ad algorithm served me a lifeline. A link. The circuit breaker, a 7-day cognitive reset. It sounded like a user manual for a broken machine. It was sterile, insulting. But I was a ghost on a kitchen floor. I had nothing. I clicked day 1, the blackout. The instructions were brutal, clinical. Block him, delete the number. But then a more profound violence. Archive every photograph. Every last one. A digital burial. My thumb trembled over his name, a final terrible sacrament. This was the real goodbye. This act of my own volition. I pressed it. Blocked. I then spent an hour moving hundreds of tiny, illuminated squares of memory, each one a fresh paper cut, into a hidden folder I named X. The silence on my phone was immediate, absolute. The potential for his ghost to appear had been vanquished. It was horrifying. The protocol demanded I write down one achievement. On a stained napkin, I wrote, "I survived the silence." It felt like a magnificent lie. Day 2, the anchor. The task was an insult in its simplicity. Make your bed. My bed was a nest of sorrow, a tangle of sheets that smelled of my own grief. I stripped it bare. I put on clean, crisp sheets, pulling the comforter taut, smoothing every wrinkle. It was the first act of deliberate order I had imposed on the chaos in months. I stood back and looked at it, one small island of calm in the wreckage of my life. A flicker of something that wasn't agony sparked in my chest. My achievement, I made a place to rest. Day 3, the threshold. Walk outside for 15 minutes. Leave the phone behind. I pulled on a hoodie and stepped out the door. The shock of the cool night air on my skin was a revelation. It was real. The world was real. I walked. I forced my gaze outward. The particular sickly yellow of a fire hydrant under a streetlight. The echo of a dog barking 3 streets over. A crack in the pavement like a frozen bolt of lightning. For 15 minutes, I was just a body in motion, a part of the living world, not a prisoner in the haunted museum of my mind. I came back inside and took a deeper breath than I had in weeks. I wrote, "I remembered the world is bigger than my room." The days that followed were a quiet montage of these small, deliberate rebellions. Day 4, the ignition, was eating a single piece of toast with butter and forcing myself to taste it. Day 5, the current, was sitting still and picturing every thought of him as a leaf on a stream, watching it float past without reaching for it. At first it was a flood, a logjam of pain. But I just watched, and a space began to open up, a millimeter of air between me and the thought. The morning of day 6, the shift came. Not as a lightning strike, but as a quiet dawn. I woke up and the first conscious thought that drifted into my mind was not his name. It was not the familiar clawing ache, the cold dread that lived in my stomach. It was, "I'm thirsty," the most beautiful, glorious, blessedly mundane thought. The needle on the record of my brain had been lifted. The song had changed. This morning was day 7. I was at the sink, watering a thirsty plant I'd forgotten I owned, watching the dark, dry soil drink. And it landed, a quiet, staggering truth. I hadn't thought about the album. The hummingbird in my thumb was still. The gnawing, obsessive need to excavate, to know, had simply dissolved. It wasn't a victory won in a great battle. It was just gone. The pressure in my apartment had vanished. The silence was no longer a weight. It was just quiet. I'm telling you this, laying bare the architecture of my own insanity, because I know that kitchen floor. I know the feeling of being unwritten. I know the conviction that the spiral is the only direction left. I never believed a stupid clinical list could build a bridge across that kind of abyss. It didn't heal me. The scar is a part of my landscape now. But it gave me a blueprint. One ridiculously small, painfully simple step at a time, it showed me how to build a lifeboat. It taught me how to find the switch and break the circuit. So if you are there on the floor in the dark, staring at a timestamp and feeling your own edges blur, please just listen. There is a way back. It's not cinematic or poetic. It's small and methodical and feels too simple to be true. But it is. Find your own stupid list.